All right. We're here with Sam Stern, SmartPoint Data Strategies, here today to talk about data management and politics. Sam, thanks for coming on and chatting with us.
Awesome. I'm very happy to be here. Talk about data and everything politics related. So
Right on. So I found your business a while ago, and it was intriguing to me because I thought it was particularly important and one of those areas of campaign politics that was so desperately needed, which is, if I hope I'm properly characterizing your business, but you provide data management solutions almost like a outsourced or third party data manager. So campaigns will typically have a data director on their team. Typically, larger campaigns will have a data director on their team, but you're able to provide those types of solutions for clients across the country running for races up and down the ballot. Is that a fair characterization?
yeah, so it focuses it more on data management. And yeah, we work with candidates from school board up to congressional races, and it works on. We try to work on a side of data that a lot of people don't think about. So when people think about data in politics, I think they think about modeling and what kind of turnout models and issue models and all that kind of stuff. But there's so much data you can collect from having conversations with people. If you're doing text or phone calls or knocking doors, all the data that's coming back is just as important as anything else you can collect. So we kind of focus on aggregating all of that and helping campaigns make decisions based off that, as well as targeting and all that kind of stuff.
So data hygiene seems to be a focus of yours, and one of those areas
Mhm.
I think that campaigns struggle with. Is that kind of core to your business model, the data hygiene side of things?
Yeah, so that's one of the things we kind of specialize in that you wouldn't get from probably a regular data director. So I come from a software engineering background, so everything I have is kind of automated at some level, and so I can write up scripts quickly to clean data. But that's so important because you don't want duplicates in your data, and you don't want addresses being wrong in fields and phone numbers being in different formats so that you can't dedupe them. So having clean data and standardizing all your data is one of the most important things to keeping your data useful to you on your campaign.
As a former and lifelong campaigner, I can tell you that uh, data integrity is always one of those issues that we would run into, because especially when aggregating data from multiple different sources, they may store or may organize their data in different ways, whether it's having the addresses with different abbreviations or using a different naming convention for particular pieces of data. Uh, I think that that's one of those areas where you can make a significant impact on your overall data integrity is just by having a good hygiene pipeline.
Yeah, and one of the other things, like if you have pieces of data from different places, so you have a name for one place, an address from another place, or an email for another place, kind of creating one source of truth for all of your voters. So how we kind of like to work is the voter file is your source of truth, and everything should join back to your voter file. For a campaign, obviously, for an organization, that might be different. For a campaign, your voter file is your source of truth. That's all the voters in your district. And then when you do contacts and you talk to people, everything should match back to your voter file, or something's not going right. So having a good base and then kind of being able to reference back to that is the key to organizing that.
I dig it. So you mentioned you have a software engineering background. Maybe tell us a little bit more about how you got started, what inspired you to start this business, And what's kind of your background in campaign politics? How did you get involved in this whole thing?
Yeah, so in 2016 I was software engineering major, obviously. And I got really into politics, and I think I was a junior or a senior, and I was like, how can I marry these two things? I can't switch to political science in my senior year, but how can I kind of marry these two things together? So I kind of looked for data jobs in politics. I went to work for a firm in Texas, where I was a data engineer. And then I worked at Campaign HQ and was a data engineer there as well, and became the chief information officer. And so I've kind of found ways to marry data management and politics without getting too far into the weeds of the modeling side of it. Because I'm not a stats guy. I think that's like it's like, oh, you do computers, you can do models and stuff. Well, that's more of a math thing, and I'm good at math, but not quite that at that level. And so I got started. So one of my best friends, I think you know her as well, Morgan Bonwell, started. We used to work together. She started her own business around January of last year, and she was kind of really the inspiration of me starting my business. She went out and was super successful and doing a great job. And I was like, I kind of miss being closer to the campaign. And so I'm like, I can do this. And I kind of went out on my own and wanted to get closer working with consultants and campaigns as opposed to being a vendor. And that's kind of the story of how we got here.
I would not have advised switching to poli sci major. I wouldn't advise it for much of anybody, especially not for a computer science major. But so it's a good thing you didn't. And
Yeah.
shout out to Morgan at Right Strategies for inspiring you to start this business. I really do think that there's a tremendous amount of value that a dedicated data director, whether it's outsourced or otherwise, can make on the organization of a campaign or organizations that are involved in campaigning, whether
Hmm.
it's PACs, vendors, C4s, other types of organizations. But so you've been at this for the better part of a year and a half now, right?
Hmm. Yeah, just about.
So what have you learned along the way? Any major surprises that or key takeaways that you learned actually in engaging with campaigns on their data?
Yeah. So on the data side of it, I've learned that the biggest problem I've actually faced, this is going to sound really funny, is mapping yard signs. People love candidates, especially at the local level. I've worked with a lot of candidates and consultants that work at the local level, and people love yard signs, and
Damn right.
they do. And there's not a good way to map yard signs. You can try to do it in Advantage, you can try to do it in i360, but there's not a good way to do it. So that's been surprising to me. It seems like there's something that's like something dumb that should be fixed already, or a way to do that. And maybe I just haven't found it yet. But that's been a real weird sticking point of working on these local campaigns. Other than that, like it's been really cool to get to do exactly what I want to do. So like one of my favorite times in politics is early voting. And so we put together early voting reports every day for all our clients. And just seeing that data come to life is super exciting. So not so much surprises because on the data side of it, not so much surprises because I'm doing exactly what I want to do. On the business side, I've it's been different. I'm not a business person at my core, so that's kind of been my biggest learning curve. But we're getting through it and learning everything. So
Well, I can attest to the fact that you provide a great service. So I encourage anyone who needs a data manager, somebody who can do appends, who can do sort of just basic data management and hygiene to reach out. And I think they could find you at SmartPoint Data Strategies, smartpointdata.com, rather, smartpointdata.com. And we'll link to this as well. But you mentioned early voting, absentee voting, ballot chasing. This is going to be a major focus in
Hmm.
the 2024 cycle. I think that there were some discrepancies between how each party approached this I guess tactic
Hmm.
or strategy and the tactics around early voting, absentee voting, ballot chasing, ballot harvesting, and things of that nature. So I expect you to have plenty of opportunity to engage with campaigns up and down the ballot in 2024.
Yeah, well, I come from Texas where early voting is king. And so I didn't realize people didn't early vote until I moved. Like other states didn't really do that until I moved from Texas. Because like in Texas, I think off the top of my head, it's like 70% of people vote before election day. So like there is a very heavy push for early voting in Texas. And so I just thought that was the way every state was, but I learned that's not exactly the case. So, but having that early voting push is so important for a campaign. So, like, the earlier you can get your people to vote, the better. Like the more you can guarantee that your people are going to vote, the better you can be. There's really no downside to early voting, especially when you can do it in person, and it's like you've got so much time to do it. It provides such a convenience that campaigns really should push people to do that rather than trying to save all your money and getting them out on election day. The other
Well,
side of that, oh, go ahead.
please go ahead.
I was gonna say on the other side of that, like you can save the more people that vote early, the more money you can save. So what we try to focus on is removing everybody who's already voted. So people down the stretch, every voter knows that they'll get 9,000 texts down the stretch. Go vote, go vote, go vote. And we kind of tell them if you want to get off our list, go vote.
Go vote.
It's that simple. If you vote, you will be removed because we're not going to waste time talking to you if you've already voted. So having that motivation to get out and vote, or giving people that motivation to go out and vote early is important to save money and also win your election.
I when I came up in campaign politics, like our GOTV meant it essentially meant, at least for me, it meant stacking up as many sort of positive IDs, people that are going to vote for you or you have a strong reason to believe that they're going to support your candidate, your side, your cause, and collecting as many of those records as possible. And then it was really about the last week or 2 weeks of the election where we would literally knock and drag or hammer them with phone calls. Texting was a component, was starting then, but it was primarily phone banking and
Hmm.
encouraging people to vote. And as I started my own consulting business, I learned that, for example, in Utah, that most people vote by mail. This
Hmm.
makes sense, but it never had occurred to me that that you could vote by mail or that would it would be a popular option. So every state is different, and that does that present any unique challenges for you? Have you found that you've had to make adjustments to how you deliver product for different types of organizations or in different states?
Yeah, so it matters, I guess, who you want to target. So in a state like Texas with like 70% early voting, you can probably text or contact all your whole Republican universe to get them out to vote. In a state like we work a lot in Indiana, I think 30% of people vote before election day.
Hmm.
So targeting that more towards your people or people that have voted early in previous elections might be a better use of your time. But again, like there is no harm in going wide. Even if someone's never voted early before, that doesn't mean they couldn't vote early this time. They
That's
could
right.
be out of the state or out of their county at the time of voting. You never know. And so, even if you can afford to push everyone out to vote early, you should. Even if the percentage of people that don't vote early is high, because you want that number to be as high as possible. Even if it isn't, pushing that number higher is better for us and better for them. And the other thing that's important that we do is absentee ballot chase calls and mailers. So you can actually get a list of people who've requested a ballot in some states. We're talking specifically in this case in Indiana. So once we get that list daily, and so what we try to do is send a mailer or a postcard or something that will hit the mailbox at the same time as their ballot. So when they go to pick up their ballot from the mailbox, they will have a mailer or lit for the candidate that we want them to vote for. So that they're the last thing they see when hopefully they go to fill out the ballot. They're like, oh, he's right here. Let's vote for him. So that's another important piece of that early voting, vote by mail puzzle that we've kind of been working on.
So you talked about a number of the practical applications of why to use a a data manager like yourself to do. So you mentioned, GOTV and early voting, absentee ballot chase. Are there other use cases for your data management services? Are people using your data management services to organize, for example, their email programs or their texting, or what are or digital ads? What other practical applications do people use your data management services to help coordinate?
Yeah, so the we will kind of do anything and everything data related. We do some analysis. So early in the campaign, we can do district analyses to help number one pitch clients. I have a consultant that I work with that he asks for district analyses before he pitches clients. So he goes to them and says, "This is what we know about your district. These are kind of some rough counts of universes that we might want to target, and that kind of helps in the pitch process. Other than that, like we can help one-off texts, phones, pulling lists, but I think the greatest value comes from that whole campaign experience, where the value of the service the data management service for a campaign builds over time. So the more voter contact you do, the more valuable it becomes. So getting in early and making sure that every voter contact you do from the start of your campaign to the end of your campaign is aggregated and standardized and in the same place is incredibly important, because say I come in halfway through. Number one, we have to
You've
play
already
catch
lost so
up.
much data.
Yeah, number one, you've already lost so much data, or we have to play catch up, and then there's all that time that we could have been using that data for something that is missed. So the value really builds over time, and that's why it's early to get. If you want data management on your campaign, or a consultant that wants to use our services, getting in early is so.
So one of the unique value propositions, talking a little bit more about the business side here, is that a full-time data director may not be necessary, or may not feel necessary from a sort of monthly retainer basis. Where you can't necessarily justify having a full-time data director on your campaign team for five, seven, however many thousands of dollars per month, when the inputs into the system may be relatively light
Mhm.
for the first few months. But with your business model, you're able to provide the same types of, at least my understanding, and correct me where I'm wrong, but you're able to provide those services to keep that data drum tight, but in a
Hmm.
way that is scalable and scales as you grow. So you're that it's built on a cost effective basis. You can
Hmm.
still maintain and implement those data management best practices, have your data up to date, but without having allocating the resources towards a full-time data director, which may not be in the budget.
Yeah, and the other thing about a lot of campaigns, as I understand it, use data directors as like half a data director and half a door knocker. Um, and so we obviously don't knock doors, but we can do kind of everything else that data director does. The truth is that a data director on a campaign is not a 40-hour a week job. You don't do voter contact every single day. I mean, if you have a campaign team out there knocking doors, the data director's job would be to pull the data and aggregate it at the end of the day. Like, and that's maybe an hour long thing. So the having to pay for someone full time to do that, it seems like it could be better used contracting that out for cheaper, and someone that comes from a technological and data background at a higher level than you could probably get from your average data director. Not that there's not great data directors out there, but like coming from the background that I come from, I think I can provide a little higher level service than your average data
Yeah, if your data director is splitting their time between field comms or digital or anything else, then necessarily you're going to be sacrificing at one end of the candle or another.
director.
And there is there's this is definitely the type of activity that you want a high level of familiarity in a sophisticated operator
Hmm.
doing the actual work. So I could see that as being a very compelling, unique value proposition for why someone should work with you versus
Hmm.
trying to DIY it in house.
Yeah, and the other value is that it builds over time from the beginning of your campaign to the end of your campaign, but it also builds from campaign to campaign.
Hmm.
So if you were an incumbent, you're running again, you start your next campaign with all this data from your previous campaign. If you won or lost, like a lot of people decide to run again after they lost one time or two times, you have all that data that you ended with last time starting with this time. So you have all your supporters, your undecideds, the people that gave to you, the people that signed up for your email newsletter. And so the value can become huge over time, especially if you keep on winning. If you're in a close district and you keep having close races over and over and over, now you have this trove of data that you can use to make sure that you keep winning over time. And the other thing is you can see how people's attitudes change over time. So if you had one election where one voter says they support you, and then next year they're undecided, figuring out why or what we can do to fix that is also super important.
I had contemplated in the past a product, something like a campaign data deep freeze,
Hmm.
where because of the dynamic you just so accurately described, is that oftentimes win, lose, or draw, the after election day, you're either partying or you're drowning your sorrows.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the data, whether it's actual spreadsheets, tables, or it could be assets, it could be other pieces of digital information,
Hmm.
whatever the case may be. A lot of times those things are lost, and they may be scattered in Google Drives or Dropbox or
Hmm.
other types of folders, digital folders. But having a sort of a deep freeze where everything gets organized into a, a shareable file that it continues to be maintained in such a way that it becomes useful again in the next cycle. Was
Hmm.
I never pursued it, but I always thought that that would be an interesting product offering for intra campaign operations.
Yeah, and that's super smart. Like you're not doing anything with your data for the interim, but you never know when you might need it in the future. And it's super, we kind of make it super easy when everything's aggregated. So the voter file is kind of the base level. Then we have a contacts table. Every contacts you make from any voter file or any voter contact from any source kind of gets aggregated into that contacts table. So you don't have 1,000 spreadsheets. We have two tables, your voter file and your contacts table that join back to each other, and that's it. Like you don't need 9,000 tables to have clean data to go from data to campaign. It just it's so much more important to be organized than it is to be to have that massive data that's not organized. I guess it's better to have less data that's organized and more data that's not organized.
Yeah, to your point, and it's a really good segue into talking about sort of data management best practices. But so often you'll see that in these, Google Drives, let's assume that somebody has a Google Drive or a Dropbox that they're using to, maintain all of their shared assets. You'll have, you'll have a supporters page, you'll have a volunteers table, you'll have a donor, maybe your donor list, and maybe it's your high dollar donor list, and then maybe your small dollar donor list, your email list, and then there's people who signed up on the website, and then there's another table for it could be any number of things, but you have all these disparate tables, and
Hmm.
they're not all tied together. But it sounds like one of your primary, I guess, objectives is to tie everything back into a single source of truth.
Yes, yes, that's so important because so we work with a county party that kind of does something similar to what we talked about. They have volunteers, they have email lists, they have everything, members of their party,
Event
and
hosts,
yeah, event hosts, all that stuff. And what we did when we first started working with them was to they're essentially tagged on the voter file as opposed to having all these files. We just have a tag that says they were an event host, they are on the email list. So that way we have our single source of truth, the voter file, but we also have a tag that says this is what they were. Because ultimately, you don't need, all you need to know is that person is that tag, I guess.
right?
And
And to be able to
having,
query for those types of people, whatever
exactly,
the attribute that you're looking for is.
exactly. So consolidation is one of the biggest pieces of the data management puzzle.
So other either data best practices that you wish all of your clients implemented, or maybe mistakes to avoid, anything that you'd like to share with the good of the order.
So one best practice that I think is best practice, I know a lot of people might not agree with this, but I'm a fan of keeping every data point. A lot of people will throw away things that they might not think are useful. And obviously there's space and price considerations sometimes. But I am a fan of keeping as much data as humanly possible. So if you get your texting back and you only keep the phone and the ID, certainly you can get good data out of that. But there's so much other stuff that your vendor could send you back, that you could that you might not need right away, but like you might look back and say, hey, that would have been nice to know when that was sent, or what they replied back,
Replies,
conversations that you've had
how many
with.
text messages they received, for
Yeah,
example.
yeah, yeah. So all that. So keeping all of your data points is super important. And that kind of segues into the mistakes to avoid is not getting the most out of your vendors. So a lot of people will use their vendors, and they'll kind of get a report back. And all vendors report back on what they did, or your text message will give you probably a nice little chart on what your how many IDs you had and how many people supported you. But making sure you get the raw data back is so important, especially at the local level when you'll probably know a lot of people on your list, and you can say, "Hey, like this person said they were undecided. I can just call them up." And I mean, obviously, at the higher level, still knowing who exactly said what is important, because you could look at your if you get a report back and it says 53% support, 47% undecided. Who are your supporters? What characteristics about them make them supporters? What same with the opposed? Who is opposed, and how can we make them not opposed? And so getting the most out of your vendors by getting everything possible you can get back from them is super important. The next mistake to avoid is not using a common ID. Most, I think every state has obviously state voter IDs. And so we try to use that as the source of ID for every voter because it's unique and I don't have to assign it to somebody and it's already assigned to them. That's their ID number. But if that's not possible, you can just use an index. Like in Excel, you can just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 from the very beginning. And as long as you maintain that throughout your campaign, it will work in the same way that a state voter ID would. As long as there's some unique number tied to each unique record, it will work. No matter what you try to do, you just need to make sure to use that. So sometimes if you're doing texting or phone calls, you might only send the phone number. That's not super useful. I mean, people, we can obviously join that back to the file, but like sometimes people share landlines, and who were you trying to contact? Or sometimes people's cell phone numbers show up under the whole family because that's the head on the plan or something. So making sure you know who exactly with that phone number you're talking to is important.
And sharing that unique ID with your vendors and
Yes,
insisting that unique ID carries throughout their process so that the outputs at the end can be easily tied back to the correct records. You're not duplicating or or creating additional records where you don't need to.
exactly, exactly. If there was one tip that I would give, the most important tip would be to use a common ID. Like you can consolidate all your consolidation becomes super easy when you have a common ID. Everything else kind of becomes organizing your data becomes super easy when you have a common ID to join things to. So that's if there was one piece of advice I would give for people managing their data out there, would be use a common ID. And finally, backing up your data. We kind of talked about this from campaign to campaign, but technology can be fickle sometimes, and making sure that you have a backup of your data somewhere is super important.
All of these seem like they seem like common sense, simple best practices, but I think we both know that oftentimes in the hustle and bustle of campaign life, these simple things get forgotten. So that's kind of a good segue back into sort of learning a little bit more about your business. On the business side, you mentioned that you're not necessarily a business guy, but you're a data guy, and
Mhm.
so you may have learned, as many entrepreneurs do, that there is a discrepancy between things like the level of intent of a potential customer,
Mhm.
whether they need your service now or they need your service later, or
Mhm.
if they fully understand and appreciate your product offering. What have been the biggest challenges that you faced when talking to potential customers? Is there an educational aspect to it? Is there a sense of urgency that you're trying to articulate, or what has that experience been like?
Yeah, so it's been it's oddly difficult to explain. So a lot of the value is things that people don't see. I can save I can save clients a ton of time because I've kind of got a process that works where I can do things a lot quicker than a lot of other if you did it yourself or if you hired maybe someone else. The value is seen in the speed of it, but I see that. Like clients don't often see that I've got everything automated in the background. Like I can obviously say that, but like uh, the value they see is hopefully that I can save them time is the main thing that like especially consultants who might have like 4 or 5 GC races going on. I can manage data for all 5 of those campaigns and you don't even have to think about it. That's like the thing that I try to convey most to clients is that like you won't have to think about data anymore. Like we can as long as I get the data, like you don't have to think about it being aggregated. You don't have to think about all you have to do is email me. I need a list, and this is who we want to target, or maybe, hey, who do you think we should target for this? Can you pull me a list? So saving time is the value proposition that I try to give to consultants, and it's difficult because obviously I'm trying to get in with consultants now because they'll have races next year. Again, this starts like the earlier you get going, the better. So getting in with consultants when they don't have clients is kind of the most is kind of important, which is may seem a little weird for because a lot of businesses are like are texting vendors or mail vendors. You'll always need mail and you always need texts, no matter the beginning or the end. I'm not of much use at the end of the campaign, so getting in with consultants early in the process is important. So that's what I'm trying to spend most of my time doing now.
So what's next? Anything coming down the pipe? Anything else you would are looking at from either a expanded product offering, different vertical markets that you might like to enter? What's next for your business?
Yeah, so I'm trying to solve my yard sign problem. I'm trying to make a simple website or web app that you can map your yard signs on. The thing, all I needed to do, I don't know how this doesn't exist. I need something to map to map addresses and stuff. Okay, but I also need to be able to click that it's done. You can't do that on Google Maps,
That's right.
and so that's like the main disconnect there. So I'm trying to solve that problem. Other than that, I'm just trying to meet more people and get more stuff out there that I can help with.
Well, I can attest to
Yeah.
the fact that you provide a fantastic service that is desperately needed by so many organizations that I've worked with, that we work with today. I think that it is a no-brainer from my perspective. Of course, you save time, you do save money,
Hmm.
and you also get the peace of mind knowing that there is a sophisticated operator behind the scenes working on your behalf, and you're not relying on, when I term I use frequently and with affection, some chump kid who is working as your you know data director slash finance coordinator, or data director slash
Yeah,
name your campaign staff, like pizza
exactly.
gatherer, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, yeah. So the specialization can be a huge asset.
I dig it. Well, thank you again for taking the time. This has been super elucidating. I love your business and I love what you're doing. Looking forward to seeing what's next.
Well, thank you so much. It's been great working with you, and this has been super cool.
Right on. Be well.
Alrighty, see ya.